So today's topic, as you heard, is reincarnation, the spiral staircase. And in that phrase are two things. One is reincarnation, which, reincarnation is a fact of life, or maybe it's a fact of death. There's a statement in the Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter. It's one of the most famous verses. And it goes something like this. Vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grhnati naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. That's in the Sanskrit. And what it means is, just as you and I, when a piece of clothing becomes threadbare and torn, we toss out that piece of clothing and get a new one. In a similar way, when the clothing of this body is worn out, the soul acquires a new body. And what is remarkable about that is the matter-of-fact way in which it captures reincarnation. The bhav, the feeling of it, is not so much that death is something irreversible, death is a big change, but it is that underneath the change of death is the constancy of the soul. So it's reincarnation, something that is already there and continues to exist, just came back in a new form. So that's part one. And all scriptures, when you look deep enough, are unanimous in this. And just the why reincarnation and so on, that itself is a different topic. I want to pick it up differently today, but let me quickly talk about the spiral staircase. The metaphor there is that you reincarnate, you come back, you're roughly at the same place, meaning same set of circumstance maybe. At some deep enough level, you might reincarnate someplace else, but you have somehow gone up in your consciousness. There is some progress that has been made. That speaks in one way to some kind of a linear trajectory that, okay, it's not rinse and repeat, it's rinse and almost repeat, because in the process of rinsing, you've become that much cleaner. So there is that little bit of ascent there. But it's also saying that reincarnation has a purpose, that we are going somewhere. It's not just, come back into this life again and again, but we are going somewhere. So in that sense, reincarnation, the spiral staircase, is a pilgrimage, that we go someplace to see the deeper meaning in a place or a time or in a saint, or most importantly, within ourselves. And that's kind of the segue that I wanted to lead up to, because I'm going to segue now. Almost exactly a month ago, about 24 of us went on a pilgrimage to India. And the pilgrimage lasted just around 3 weeks, maybe a day more or so. And before I go into the pilgrimage, I want to point out the obvious elephant in the room here about reincarnation. It's a very good friend of mine. His name is Jim. And there was a time in my career where I used to travel to somewhat of an exotic locale pretty much every month. It was a set of meetings, and we had the freedom to meet anywhere we wanted. So one time it would be Brazil, the other time it would be France, Alaska, Oklahoma City, we just go everywhere. And wherever Jim worked for a different company, and we all saw each other. And everywhere we met, he would always say, when I was in Paris in spring 2 years ago, this is what happened. When I was in Alaska, this volcano erupted. When I was in Los Angeles, there were these riots. And last time I used to say, it was not all bad things. When I was in Brazil, I happened to visit the rainforest. So he always had these memories, hundreds upon hundreds of them. And whenever many of us, we saw Jim, we saw him through the lens of these memories, through the garb of these memories. He was so many things because he had been to so many places. Now, the elephant in the room where reincarnation is concerned is precisely that. Yogananda said that by the time we even want to know God, that we decide that that is a relevant pursuit for us, we would have probably reincarnated, get this, 1,000,000 times. Okay, 1,000,000 times. Assume a lifespan of maybe 50 years is 50 million years worth of experiences. Now, Jim, my friend, had 50 years worth of experiences and appeared so rich and varied and interesting. Each of us, we carry a caboose behind us, which is 50 million years worth of experiences. Where are they? This is the elephant in the room as far as reincarnation is concerned. I'll talk only a little bit about it. I won't address it in its entirety, but I'll talk about the most important aspect of it. But for now, take this thing and keep that right here. We'll come back and pick it up, but let it be right here. Where are those memories? So coming back to the pilgrimage. Our pilgrimage started in Benares. And Benares is a city in northern India. It is along the banks of the Ganges River. And what's interesting about Benares is what they say in terms of the legend of that place. It said that Brahma, the creator, had the responsibility to create everything. But then when he started creating, he realized that creation had a pre-existing condition. Something was already there before creation. And what that was the city of Benares. Okay? So it was timeless. What is the main occupation of the city that existed beyond time? Death. That's what's special about Benares is people come there to die. I'll just leave that with you to think about time and death and timelessness and creation and so on. But once you enter the city, it is utterly chaotic, even by Indian standards. Even for me, where I grew up, the chaos is at a different level. It is not merely chaos that arises from not planning things well. That is one kind of chaos. There's another kind of chaos that comes from the sheer diversity of what people want to do. Everybody is doing different things. Nothing works, yet everything kind of works. There is no logic to the traffic. There is no logic to the cuisine. There is no logic to the street arrangements. There is no logic to anything. It's a chaos of a different level. And then straight from the US, we came right into Benares. We had one way station, doesn't really matter. It was notable mostly for its pollution. So I'll skip right over that. Then we came into Benares. By the way, in the end, I'm trying to sell you the pilgrimage, so stick with me. We came into Benares, and then as we got into it, we had a sunrise meditation on a boat on the Ganges River, and then we visited the home of Lahiri Mahashaya. Lahiri Mahashaya is Paramhansa Yogananda, whose teachings we follow here. His teacher's teacher, and it's just a nondescript, humble home in a crowded alleyway, which happens to be one of the centers of silk wholesale in the city of Benares. I say that to give you a sense of how much traffic and people there are. Then you go there, and then you suddenly feel a power, a presence that cuts through the chaos. Then it draws your consciousness out of all the chaos into a stillness that you wouldn't think was possible. We think of stillness as the absence of chaos, but here is the stillness underlying the chaos, as if even the chaos needs a foundation of stillness on which it can be chaotic. That's a different experience of stillness. Then you go there, and then the next day we see a arati, a festival of light that is done. It's very interesting. The river is flowing. It's about a mile wide, well, a kilometer wide, about 0.6 miles wide at this point. And tens of thousands of people, and along the steps, they hold these massive light posts. There's no other way to say that, with hundreds and hundreds of little lamps. And it's dusk, and they start doing the festival of light first to the river, which represents the Divine Mother in her aspect of wisdom. And then they turn around in the middle and do the arati to Shiva, the Lord of destruction, the supreme spirit that that not survives but exists beyond all creation. They turn around and do that, and then they turn back and do the arati to the entire creation for their betterment. They don't say any of this. It's just, it starts as a spectacle but becomes as something far deeper. And then the following day we finished the Ganga river, and then we went up to the Shiva temple, and then some of the pilgrims were right next to the Shiva temple, sandwiched on the river on one side and the temple on the other side, are the great cremation ghats of Kashi, of Benares, where 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in this city beyond time, cremations take place, and every funeral pyre is lit with a jyoti, a light, that has been burning in that spot for as long as anyone can remember. And they are keepers of the flame of cremation. Think about that for a moment. So where I'm going with this was, by the end of these 3 days, almost all pilgrims said a variation of something, of what I'm about to say. He said, this feels a little bit like home. It feels like I have come home. It feels like there is something incredible in this place. It feels like my heart is resonating to what is natural about this place. That's why I said all I said. Hopefully I illustrated the contrast. But then you feel natural in there. And there is 2 reasons for this. One is, remember this thing that we kept here, where are all the memories? Well, we've perhaps been there. 1,000,000 lifetimes, we've probably been there. Or in a situation similar, where we look at death and timelessness and life and chaos and stillness beyond its outer form and see the presence of God right there. That's what Benares reminds us of. 1,000,000 memories we've had of this as we ascend up the spiral staircase. That is one reason. But it's not merely about time and location. The real memory of the spiral staircase is not that, oh my God, I have been to the deserts of Sedona, and I have been to the Ganges River in Kashi and the volcanoes of Hawaii and things like that. It's that too. But it is a memory of who we really are. The first day in Benares, we landed there the previous night, and the next day, we were up at 5:30 and came down to the river. Sunrise was about 15 minutes away, and we got into a boat, and the boat turned on its engine, went to the middle of the river, and then turned off the engine and just drifted. The sunrise was happening on the other bank. This would be the right bank of the river. And then we were coming through these ghats. It was foggy, partly because it was actually foggy, partly because it was polluted, but the combination was a fog. And then you'd see dim outlines of these temples. You would see the detritus of the arati of the previous night, and then you're drifting by there. Somebody is chanting Gayatri Mantra, somebody is blowing a conch, the river itself is making the sound that it does. And we were chanting, just not unlike what we just did a few minutes ago. We were chanting, and then we went into meditation. And remember, this is Benares. There is always 10,000 people, no matter what time of the day or night. And in the midst of all that, we were just transported. And one of the pilgrims, she said that it felt like the river was timeless, and the sun was always rising, and then she was part of this timelessness. And she felt something beyond her body, something beyond the existence. And the way Swami Kriyananda puts this, he says, when you go to pilgrimage places like this, where many saints have meditated, saints leave behind a kind of spiritual magnetism. And when we go there with reverence and openness, we can absorb those vibrations and awaken the same qualities within ourselves. That's the point. Whether it's the pilgrimage of 1,000,000 reincarnations or a pilgrimage to India for 3 weeks, it doesn't matter. We are ascending the same spiral staircase of awakening to who we really are. Then the next logical question from there is, what are we awakening into? Are we awakening into the fact that we have superpowers, or that we can read other people's minds, or we can create a golden palace, just to take a random example? What are we awakening into? So taking the vibrations of the saints a bit further. From Benares, we were in the middle of India, for those of you that have a sense of that map. Then we proceeded east onto the sea coast to another city called Puri, P-U-R-I, Puri. And in Sanskrit, Puri simply means city. It's literally, you know how there is a town in Switzerland called Stadt, which really means city. Puri is similar. And this was the home of Sri Yukteshwar, Yogananda's guru. We went from Guru's guru, Lahiri Mahashaya, to his guru, Sri Yukteshwar. He was a Swami. That's why we say Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteshwar. Swami means he was a renunciant, the oldest order of monastics that is still continuing to this day. And India has an interesting custom. If you are a householder, then you are cremated. Then hopefully all householders wish that they get to be cremated in Benares, like I just went through. If you're a Swami, you're not cremated, you're buried. And do you know why that is? Say a renunciant who has dedicated his or her life to God, their body itself, their corporeal form, is filled with divine vibrations. And therefore, when you bury them and people come and visit the burial site, they are sanctified because those vibrations persist through the material body. And so it was that Sri Yukteshwar was buried in Puri, and he's buried in a place in his ashram, about 6 feet under, just, it literally 6 feet under. And then on top of it is a shrine, and then we sat around and meditated there. So we are absorbing the vibrations of that are permeating the physical body of a God-realized soul. Okay? And it wouldn't be too different, one would assume, of visiting him when he was in his body. Because that's the whole point of burying a Swami instead of cremating. So here's how Yogananda described what happened when he visited his guru, Sri Yukteshwar. He said, if I entered the hermitage, that's the same hermitage we were meditating in, if I entered the hermitage in a worried or indifferent frame of mind, my attitude imperceptibly changed. A healing calm descended at the mere sight of my guru. Every day with him was a new experience in joy, peace, and wisdom. So when you go to a place like this, those are the qualities that we awaken to. When we are on a pilgrimage, we awaken to these qualities of joy, peace, and wisdom within ourselves, not our ability to feel joy, not our ability to be wise, but that's what we are in the deepest essence. And we could feel in whatever smaller way that each of us were capable of. We could feel it. And for me, it was interesting. I won't talk about what I felt, it's not that relevant. But that afternoon, we were in a very beautiful seaside hotel. That was our lodgings. It was really beautiful, awesome food. We had a private beach. Rooms were very, very nice. The only problem was there was no place to practice. So we all gathered. One of the pilgrims, luck of the draw, happened to get a really large, beautiful ocean-facing suite. So we gathered in her suite so that we could practice a few pranayamas. That was a class that I was teaching. The morning we had meditated for the second time at Sri Yukteshwar's Mahasamadhi, where he was buried. Then in this class, I have taught this class many, many times before. But I could feel everybody tuning into it at a different level. Now, those of you that are pilgrims, that are here, you perhaps remember that class. People were tuning into it at a different level. It was like teaching a very advanced class where not much needed to be said. Everybody just got it. And I had absolutely nothing to do with it. I used the same words. I don't know any other words to use. But it was collectively, our consciousness was lifted up into this wisdom that can only come from attunement to the divine. You see what I'm saying? That's what it feels like. That's what the spiral staircase feels like, is lifetime after lifetime. We keep arriving at a place where suddenly one lifetime we begin to feel, oh my God, all of this, the chaos of Benares, the dualities of life, beneath that flows the waters of deep stillness and of God. So that's kind of how it proceeded. And from Puri, we came up to Kolkata, which is just a little bit north from there. Kolkata was the place of Yogananda's childhood home. There's many, many things that I could say about Kolkata and our time there. But in his boyhood home, which is still preserved, and there are people living there, and they have dedicated their lives to serving devotees like us, there is an attic room. And the attic room where Yogananda meditated is very special. Yogananda, our guru, for many of us, he lost his mother when he was around 11 years old. And she was a big presence of love in his life. She embodied pure love. And then when she left, his level, his consciousness was such that when he lost the earthly love, he began to pine for divine love. He said, that's the only thing that can replace it. And then the many things happen, and one day he goes to someone named Master Mahashaya, a very advanced saint, and says, sir, please do something so that I can feel Divine Mother's presence. I can no longer be separated. And then Master Mahashaya says, okay, no problem. I have just spoken to her. You go, things will be good. And then he comes to this attic. It's evening time. He goes up these steep stairs, which we went up. There's really steep stairs. And he sits in this little attic, and then he begins to meditate. And presumably for 3 or 4 hours, he just keeps calling to Divine Mother, where are you? Why haven't you come? Show yourself. Reveal thyself. And then in that room, in this little attic, Divine Mother, Kali, she manifests herself and says, in ringing tones, is what the book says, in ringing tones, she said, always have I loved thee, ever shall I love thee. And then Yogananda says, she says, it is I who have watched over thee, life after life, in the tenderness of many mothers. And so the predominant feeling when you go into this attic is one of love. You would feel it, right? It doesn't take that much. Each of us got to spend about 20 minutes there. And then the schedule was such that the next day we went to the temple of Kali in a place called Dakshneshwar, where Ramakrishna Paramhansa was there, those of you that know who he is. And some divine grace, we got a darshan. We got to look at the face of Kali there in this temple, each of us for probably 4 or 5 minutes, which is off the charts. Normally you get to see that for 5 seconds. So there's something, some quirk, some, Divine Mother was smiling. We got to see that, but I want to make a point here that the outer form didn't matter at this point. That we were all of us really felt at the Dakshneshwar that we were in the presence of love. We were seeing something that was so much different, which the outer form had nothing whatsoever to do with. See, that's the spiral staircase of reincarnation. If we come into a lifetime and we look at the outer forms, the ups and downs of life, breaking of limbs, disease, divorce, poverty, all the ups and downs, and we only feel a larger love, a larger wisdom, a larger presence, then we are very close to the top of the spiral staircase. So this one last part, and then I'll finish this longish talk. These principles, these yogic principles, are practiced in India. They are practiced in this temple and elsewhere, but then they are alive in the Himalayas. They are not simply practiced. So that was our next stop. We went into a remote cave, about 7,400 feet of altitude. You had to hike for about a mile to get there, climb 500 feet. So I'm saying all of that because it took some effort from all of us to get there. And this was the cave in which Lahiri's guru, Babaji, who is still in his body, so his living presence, we meditated in the living presence in this small cave, which will only fit 10 people if you squeeze in. And we were sitting there in this high altitude, having hiked up, having traveled there for 8 hours the previous night, that travel was remarkable only for the number of incidents of severe motion sickness. I'm talking open window, lean out kind of motion sickness. Then we came here, but it was an extraordinary experience. We were silent as we went up there, and each of us in different ways felt that stillness, that presence, and that some experience, some change, some blessing, all of these, because you were the near top of the spiral staircase. It's not that far from there. The landing is right there, and I think in our own ways, we could sense it. Not there yet, of course, but you could begin to sense it. So that's why you remember the Gita quote that I said, Vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grahnati naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. That like a new piece of clothing, the soul dons on a new body. A few verses down from there, another verse, it says, Na jayate mriyate va kadachinnayam bhutva bhavitavana bhuyah ajo nityah shashvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. And it says that the soul, which dons on a new body again and again, is never born, never dies, having once existed, never ceases to exist, is unborn, eternal, immortal, ancient, and is not destroyed even when the body is destroyed. That's a literal translation of what I just said. So the spiral staircase of reincarnation is not remarkable because something has died 1,000,000 times. It's remarkable because of something that is immortal and eternal. Om Shanti.